back, ladies and gentlemen. As promised, the Brothers of the Serpent Roadsode. We have been on the trip with Randall and Brad and Robert. And what was this? What was the trip called? What was the... Was there like a name for the...
I don't know, was it Rambling with Randall?
Maybe that's what it was, yeah. So as you can hear, we're joined by Randall and by our good friend Darren, who we met from the trip, right?
Hello.
Yep. Thanks for being here, man. And
Sure.
we all had a great time. So what we want to do, I think, is just take a little time here and talk about some of the sites we went to and what you guys thought of them and what we thought of them. So, Meteor Crater. Let's talk about that one first. That was basically...
Sure, let's talk about that one.
Yeah. So we weren't there with you guys when Kyle and I were stragglers. So I heard that you stood out and held forth over top of the crater. That must have been awesome.
Yeah. It was actually my third time there.
Ah, okay.
So, of course, this time was a little more limited. We didn't have a lot of time.
Right.
So we just had to kind of talk a little bit about the impact geology and what we were looking at. Big hole in the ground. And, a lot of the folks, it was their first time there. A few of them had seen it before.
Yeah.
But it's definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
So Kyle had seen it before. I'd never been there. Mm-hmm. So first of all, the first awesome impression is driving up and you realize it's that range of stuff on the horizon.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, holy crap.
Yeah.
That's enormous. Just seeing it from out there, you realize that's the crater rim.
The crater rim.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the first time I went, I knew nothing about any of that stuff, and I was with my wife, Laura, and we were just driving along, and we're like, okay, we're on the road. Where's the big hole? I don't see, we just keep going, and I see the building up there on the hill, and I'm like, wait a minute, is that? And yeah, when I realized that was the rim of the thing, it just blew my mind.
Well, you got to keep in mind, too, that's a small one.
Right.
It's young and small, and it's well preserved.
Right.
But, when you look at that, it's about a kilometer in diameter, about 3,300 feet, 600 feet deep. But when you're standing there looking into it, trying to imagine the force that excavated that hole.
Right.
So one of the things I was expounding upon was talking about some of the energetics of the process and comparing it to the explosion of a 15 to 20 megaton hydrogen bomb, which puts it about roughly comparable to the largest nuclear weapons ever tested by the United States back in the 50s and 60s when they were testing nuclear warheads. 15, I think it was Castle Bravo, was a 15 megaton explosion. And at that particular site, there would have been basically out to about 30 or 40 miles total devastation. Mm-hmm. If you were within 30 miles of the impact, your chances of survival would have been very low. Within 3 miles, 2 to 3 miles of the actual impact, the wind that followed the blast wave would have been somewhere between 12 and 1,600 miles per hour.
Oh my God.
So, yeah, not much is going to be able to withstand a hurricane force wind of that.
No. Yeah.
And even Darren agrees with that.
Right. So that confirms that you're totally correct.
You are correct.
Thank you.
Yeah. And the other awesome thing when we got up there and you're on the rim and you're looking down into it, and of course you can see the uplift.
Yes.
All the the tilted strata.
All the strata pushed upwards, which is really important for crater structure, right?
Yeah.
That the crater isn't made by the thing hitting the ground; it's made by the explosion that happens afterwards, and so all the strata is pushed upwards, and that's
right. And in fact, the strata surrounding the crater is uplifted, but there was a point at which the strata actually overturned. So outside the crater rim, there's strata that is upside down.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. That explains some of the stuff we saw on the outside of it then.
Yeah.
And then for miles, it looks like when you're standing up there on the outside, it's just flat.
Yeah, it's just a blasted
nothing.
flat plane. Yeah.
Well, I've seen ages that range from 25 to 50,000 years.
Right.
And I think most of the opinion puts it at about 50,000 years ago.
Right. And there was something in the museum that was saying that it may even be older than that, 60 something. Yeah.
It's hard to imagine to me that that it would still look like that after 50,000 years, unless it's just been dry there the whole time.
Well, it hasn't been. That's the thing that.
How is it not full of water? That's the other question.
Well, there have been lakes in there.
Okay, there have been before.
There have been, yes.
Okay, so there are strand lines in there, or there's evidence of the water from before.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the sediments that are in the bottom of the crater that are typical
barbs.
lake sediments.
So I wonder if Native Americans ever used it, like if it was ever full of water, because that would be a source, I mean, you'd be climbing down in there for that resource.
Harvey Harlow Nininger, who was one of the mid-20th century experts on comets and impacts, studied that crater. And he also looked into Native American legends, and he reported on a Hopi legend about the fire god descending from the sky, and they would collect shocked quartz from the crater to use in their ceremonies. And he didn't go into any background on that. Maybe we can get into that talking about on the Cosmographia podcast.
Yeah.
But I've been really curious ever since, like, wait a minute, how did where did this tradition come from?
Yeah.
Where did this legend come from? I mean, is that something that's been handed down for 50,000 years?
Right.
Or, I mean, I don't know.
That would put it in line with like the Aboriginal stuff they've shown that some of their legends are that old or close.
And also that modern scientists argued over whether the fact it was a crater
rocks
or was
fall from the
volcano.
Sky. Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
And yet the natives knew. That's pretty cool.
Well, yeah, and I was very curious about. He didn't go into any detail at all about how they use the shock quartz in their ceremonies.
Yeah.
But I will try to find that reference, and maybe we can look at that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
What was your impression of it?
Have you been there before?
I had not been there before,
Yeah.
so it was pretty cool to get to go there for the first time, and then you get to go with Randall. It's
Right,
because there were multiple times that we were gonna go, and it just fell through for one reason or another, but all fell through for a reason, because if you're gonna go the first time, you might as well go with Randall.
Exactly.
So that was pretty cool. I was telling Brad earlier that it was like, of course, we get down there and we're all looking at it, and Randall starts talking, and then the moment that the cameras come down, and then he decides to do, to question somebody. He questions me, and from something he said 3 minutes earlier, and I couldn't remember. So it's like,
I know exactly
what
what you mean.
can we edit that out? Let's start over.
No.
Because how many takes are we allowed to do here?
No, this is raw. This is no editing here.
No do-overs.
No do-overs.
It's like,
Sorry, buddy.
and it's the first place we go. So and it's like, don't screw this up. Don't screw this up. Yeah. No, it's cool. And one of you found like melted rock or
So we were they're all along the road. So don't do this, because all along the road to Meteor Crater, there's signs that say no trespassing outside the road. But what we did was we found a little place that it's just a little pull off, and we pulled off the road, and all we did was we stood right there next to the road. The sign that said no trespassing was out there with
Like
the fence.
30 feet out there.
Yeah.
We didn't go out there. We just picked up some rocks.
So we just walked back and forth right there next to the road and picked up some rocks. Yeah, and they are very interesting looking.
boiled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
We brought a bunch, so you guys can take some.
Yeah.
If you want.
Cool.
one.
Oh, really?
Of course, you're
Yeah.
close to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was totally legal.
That
Are
close.
you sure? Excuse me, I'm gonna have to go make a phone call. So,
Yeah. But yeah, the whole area was just covered in them. We were maybe we drove maybe a mile from the rim before we stopped. Yeah, so we were right there in the
yeah.
and the just you could, once you got out of the car and could really look at the ground. Mm-hmm. They were just everywhere, just these little small pebbles that are just filled with. They almost look like pumice, but they're heavier and darker. Yeah.
And I got some contact information from one of the ladies that worked there, because I was telling her, hey, we do this podcast and it'd be great if we could get an opportunity to go down in this thing and get the real sense of the scale from the bottom
That's right. I
with
forgot
a
about that.
with a scientific team or whatever, and she was really open to that and gave me a person's name and some info to call.
Sweet.
Yeah, she said there's a geologist that regularly takes college kids down in there.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah. So we
And
could
so she
perhaps
said we should contact him and
arrange something where we could actually go and learn something. From
and maybe we could get him on
On
the
the
show
show.
to talk about what.
Sure.
Yeah, that would be great.
That would be great.
Yeah. And she agreed. She was like, yes, going down into the crater is the only real way to get the sense of the actual scale of it. Because standing up there on the rim, it looks big, but you still don't really understand how big it is until you go down inside there and you can really see it.
Yeah.
So,
So then where did we go?
well,
Rock Art Ranch.
Yeah,
Rock Art
we went to
Ranch.
Rock Art Ranch. That's right. Mm-hmm. And that was amazing.
Yeah, we're driving along. It's like flat, deserty, sort of rolling, almost like prairie terrain.
Nondescript terrain.
Yes.
But very desert.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Flat.
And then suddenly you come to a place where you just, it's just this, I don't even know, maw going down into the ground. And
Yeah.
just the sandstone is bare and eroded. And then there's a huge canyon. What did you say? 60, 80 feet deep in some places?
Right, 60, 80 feet deep.
And the nature of the rock around the canyon is different it looks different from the rest
Yes.
of the desert. And suddenly you see these weird, rounded, strange looking rocks sticking
Yeah.
out of the ground. And there's this crack in them, and at the bottom of it
Yeah,
is
it's a very
water.
narrow canyon.
Yeah. Yeah.
Beautiful, full of water, and just awesome. We
Yeah.
There's
crossed the-
also another place you have to go back to because of all the things that he started. So Brantley Baird,
That's
was
right.
the owner of it, was, he went through all these list of places that he could take us to on the ranch.
Oh, yes.
And we were like, well, we only got so many more minutes left of daylight.
Right.
So he was gonna
Oh,
take
that's
us
right.
some massive hole in the earth that had opened up that he was like, you should see that. And then, a kiva and some other stuff on
Oh,
his
Yep,
property.
yep, there were some structures on the property
Right,
too.
and so
Oh, yeah,
we didn't
I
have
forgot
time to
about
do
that.
everything.
And I was
Yeah.
thinking too, that place, that's a place I would love to just go and camp and
Yeah.
spend
Yeah.
some time.
Well, we should mention that we're talking about this is a private ranch.
That's right.
That you have to make prior arrangements
Yeah.
to get in there. I think, what was it, 3,000 acres?
Something like
in
that.
Something
scale.
like that, yeah.
Something like
it was
that.
huge.
And
Yeah.
Brantley Baird,
I think so.
I think so, yeah.
yeah, the ranch owner, he
Yep.
came out and talked to us. He's a seasoned old cowboy.
Yep.
I mean, archetypal cowboy.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Right? Just
Yeah.
come out and talk to us and tell us the stories. And it was all around great. But then, when you venture down into the canyon,
Yeah.
then what?
Then there's rock art covering the walls all through there. And I guess he said some of them may be as old as 9,000 years. Is that what he said?
So he said the archaeologists that came in and looked at it dated the oldest ones at 9,000 plus years.
How do
Yeah.
you think they did that? The patina on the rock?
Maybe.
or
I don't know. I wanted to find out more. That's why, you need to go back there. But,
Yeah.
and maybe we can show some examples of some of that rock art on the Cosmographic
I think we
podcast.
can, yeah,
So
yeah.
people can see what we're talking about.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been to quite a few places with petroglyphs around the Southwest, and that one was really impressive.
Yeah.
The ones on there were just fascinating that you don't see
Right.
in a lot of other places.
And so many all over the place.
Yeah.
All
A ton
over
of
the
them.
place.
Yeah.
And the ones faded that you couldn't see anymore. I mean, if you could see all that was there, I mean, I was even thinking that's almost like an Egyptian temple because you go into some of the temples in Egypt and every square inch
Yeah.
is covered with hieroglyphs and,
Right.
and images and stuff.
Yep. And then there's little corners where you're like, oh, I didn't even notice this part. There's a whole other section.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Man, it's crazy to me to just think of, 9,000 years ago, some people come into that canyon. They find that canyon. They take refuge in the canyon or something, and they're walking in the canyon, and then they see other symbols from possibly thousands of years before them that are faded. Mm-hmm. And so then they're like, oh, let's make some, and it just keeps happening. And just, that's just cool to think about that. Because there weren't just people there
The foot on the table.
inhabited.
Oh, Mike is here.
Yeah. There weren't just people there all the time, right? There were people that would come and then they would go. And so you'd have new people show up and they'd find all the art.
Yeah.
And so they'd probably add to it. So I don't know.
Yeah.
For some reason, that's cool to me to think
Yeah,
about.
it's layered for sure.
We
And
found
it's-
it.
Yeah.
Again.
Right.
There wasn't a continuous group of people that have been making the art.
So what you're saying then, Kyle, is we need to go when we need to go back. We need to bring our spray cans
We
and
need to draw some stuff.
draw some stuff.
I think Brantley is the type that would,
He'd probably shoot us all.
Yeah. An old cowboy is not somebody I want to spray paint on.
No.
But I did do a little test. There was you can see this dark patina on the rock.
That's called rock varnish or desert varnish.
Desert varnish.
Desert varnish.
Desert
Okay.
varnish,
Yeah.
And there were some broken pieces that are just in the riverbed, And I found a little one, about a little bit larger, or like a small dessert plate or something, that had that patina on it, the varnish. And I took another granite rock and tried to scratch on it. It didn't hardly do anything to it. Mm-hmm. But you peck at it, and it breaks it up, and then you can dust it out of there, and then it turns the light color. And I think that's because some of the lines in their petroglyphs are so fine, but it's like, oh, they're still pecking that away, the whole thing.
I think you're right.
Which makes it a much more difficult task than kind of
Can't
drawing.
scrape, yeah. And you can see there were some modern attempts in there. There was at least one named David was scratched, and you could tell the guy was like,
He did not know the ancient technique.
Yeah,
It was not very good.
No, it wasn't. But some of those were like the all the lines, like the one that looks like a pyramid.
Very straight.
Straight
I saw
lines.
that
It's
one.
beautiful.
Parallel lines. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was a great sight, and then we stayed there pretty late. We looked at the stars, came out, we cooked, hung out by the fire.
Randall almost died,
Yep.
but he made it out.
He made it out.
I did take a tumble.
Yeah. Yeah. Which was, I mean, it was pitch black.
Yeah.
You
Dark.
can't see.
Right.
Yeah.
I thought I was stepping off a ledge that was 6 or 8 inches, and it was about 36 inches. So
Yeah.
I was thinking,
Oh, man. Yeah.
But that's okay. All the ladies pampered me and babied.
That's
for the
exactly
next couple
right.
of
He
days,
probably
so-
did it on purpose. That's right. So then what did we do the next day? That was the last place we were at that day. So we went back to the hotel.
We drove by the corner in Winslow, Arizona.
That's right.
that's right.
We did. We did drive by the corner. And one of us ended up there, the guy who got the flat tire.
Oh, yeah.
He said he was like, "Oh, guys, realized I was standing on a corner in Winslow, Arizona."
And I was like, and you had a world of trouble in your mind. Just having to fix a flat tire.
Yeah, I did.
That's right. So then we there were a couple places we wanted to visit, some overlooks that were all closed.
Yeah, what was... You had been to those before.
Oh,
didn't
yeah.
you?
Canyon de Chelly. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I just didn't even... I mean, I figure, okay, visitor centers and stuff closed. But then gating off the overlooks, that makes no sense.
Yeah, that was...
It was disappointing.
Yeah.
I wanted you guys to see Canyon de Chelly.
Yeah. And we could kind of see it, sort of, but
Yeah,
it's
but
not the same as getting to the overlook.
Nah,
Yeah.
it's not the same. So
Yeah.
that, we bombed out on that one.
Yeah. And there was even one road where like, yes, it's open. We turned in because the gate was open. We're like, yes, and we're all driving. And again, there's another gate that's closed down the road. Oh, God. Yeah. So we tried that a couple of times. It didn't work. So then we ended up pushing on to the next spot and we drove through Monument Valley, right? That's the next thing that happened. Man.
But yeah, we drove through some really impressive landscapes.
Yeah.
Stopped at El Capitan.
That's right.
Yeah.
That was
El Capitan, which is a volcanic neck, or diatreme, which is the geological term for that, which is a huge extrusion of basalt that comes up through the softer sedimentary rock to the surface,
Yeah.
and then through extreme events of erosion and so on, the softer sedimentary rock is stripped away and just leaves the harder basalt neck standing 15, 16, 1700 feet up in the air.
Yeah.
But the wild thing about that is when you're looking at that, you've got to keep in mind that once upon a time, the top of that neck was the ground surface.
Right.
And now you're standing, if you could transport yourself back suddenly to the time when that neck was extruded,
Yeah, you'd be 1,700 feet underground.
you'd be 1,700 feet underground.
That's crazy.
Yeah, then it's enormous, this huge thing right there, and you're just like, okay, that was the ground level, and where did all this material go? Because it's standing there like a pillar in the midst of these plains, but of course there are other buttes and pinnacles out in the distance, and the scale is so enormous.
The scale is that, yes.
That's the thing you've been saying, for a long time to us, is you got to get out there and see it. We saw some examples of that in Pagosa, but even then, those valleys were pretty close to get the edges. You're on one, you're looking across, and you can see the same strata on the other side, and all that was stripped away, and that was mind blowing. But out here, the other side is so far away. You're just like, what?
Yeah.
Well, remember I said, I was telling you about the 19th and early 20th century geologists who were first studying those landscapes and referred to it as the Great Denudation.
Right.
That the land had been so extremely denuded, and they struggled to try to explain how so much erosion had taken place. But really, we only saw a little part of it. We could have gone up into canyon lands and arches and Capitol Reef and, up by the Green River erosion, the Grand Canyon of the Gunnison. Yeah, and of course the Grand Canyon, Canyon de Chelly.
Yeah.
The Oak Creek Canyon that we drove up, on the rim of, on the edge of the Mogollon Rim. That's all eroded. I mean, you look at those rocks, the red rocks at Sedona.
Yeah.
That was all a continuous
ground level
from
the top.
Yeah. So
it's just
phenomenal amount of material excavated and transported away, and now a lot of it makes up the sands of the desert floor.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is down in the Gulf of California, because that's ultimately where the Colorado River ended up once upon a time. So
yeah, it's hard to describe, and it's hard to I mean, even when you're standing in it, I was realizing how far away these structures were, and yet at the same time, I'm like, and even that, I know that they're probably 2 or 3 times farther than I think they are, even though I know they're far away. They're just,
and it brings back the whole thing of like, just the geologists trying to explain where all this water came from, and just hearing the stories and hearing people talk about it and hearing the arguments amongst the scientific community. You're like, okay, it's the ice caps, right? Or whatever. To me, I think like, well, we had all that water in the ice, but when you actually go stand there and you're looking at the landscape and you're like, okay, that's a lot of water. I don't know.
Here's the thing. I mean, there's an assumption made. There's a model that's sort of taken implicitly without further examination, and that is the 1 grain of sand, 1 drop of water at a time is going to, and stretched over billions of years, can accomplish, which is true. It certainly can. But at the same time, I think what we're having to start to admit now is that juxtaposed upon that, more protracted incremental process, there is a series of event nodes where things, the normal processes accelerate by orders of magnitude.
yeah.
Now in the Southwest, of course, there were glaciers over the San Francisco peaks, for example, but they weren't extensive like you would have found farther north. So, I mean, if you had gigantic flooding events that contributed to the erosion, the origin of those events must have been incredible rainfall.
Right.
So
Not just the melting of the ice, but just a downpour. Continuous.
For months or longer, yeah.
And there were places, were we talking about this when we were at Valley of the Gods or something, where we were crunching around on the dirt?
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, man, yeah, if this was hit by a serious torrential downpour, you can imagine just sweeping that sandy stuff away pretty easily. And if it went on for 40 days and 40 nights.
40 nights.
Yeah, we brought that up. Yeah, the 40 days. and 40 nights.
It could be.
But that amount is just, I mean, even when it's still, you can't even standing there. You can't
fathom
imagine it. It's just,
Well,
the
yeah.
40 days of 40, it is like biblical level of
Yeah.
like flooding
Yeah.
to imagine
It's
that
the
much.
apocalypse, the end of the world. Yeah.
And so, well, yeah. So
hope you have it too.
mentioned we went through that Monument Valley was closed, so we couldn't really go in there. But of course,
Right.
it's on such a grand scale that you can see it going by it.
Yeah.
And then, but where we were headed then was Valley of the Gods, which
Right.
Kyle just mentioned, and that is the same sandstone that makes up the sandstone of the pier, the buttresses and mesas in Monument Valley.
Yeah.
But when we went from the Valley of the Gods, which is just a massive complex of eroded forms and shapes, and
Yeah.
you can understand when you're going through there why it was called Valley
Why
of
it's
the
called
Gods.
Valley of the Gods, yeah.
Yeah.
It looks like giant statues in a lot
Yeah.
of cases, yeah.
Looks like giant
Totems
statues.
and
Yeah,
stuff.
totems and that have been slowly crumbling for
Yeah.
thousands of years, and there's this pile of stuff at the bottom, but there's this gigantic head sticking out of the top
sticking
of
up
it.
out. Yeah.
Yeah.
So cool.
It's crazy.
And then we went up the Moki Dugway
That's right.
from there.
And that thing is, that cliff wall is that's like the one edge of this. Yeah. It's just, you point way out there and you're like, yeah, we're going to that. And that's one edge. And then I look behind, I'm like, where's the other one?
Well, from there we're looking miles away in the far distant horizon are the mesas and buttes of Monument Valley.
Right, yeah.
And realizing that was all continuous.
Yes. It was
In
all
there.
continuous.
So yeah, now and it's to me kind of amazing how those first geologists marveled at that, but then it just sort of got, just
Yeah, it's just how it is.
just how it is. Well,
Yeah.
see, geology sort of became, most geologists went to work for the government. A lot of them were involved in the mapping
Yeah.
of North America, which of course is extremely valuable and important and heroic. But a lot of the geologists were employed by industry.
Yeah.
And what they're mainly interested in is
Where
resources.
are the resources?
Yeah, the hydrocarbons, the mineral resources. And so they're not really trying to explain the formation of the landscapes. They're interested in what's down below the ground, and that's what they're looking for.
Yeah.
But so now we're kind of coming back around to looking at the landscapes and going, there's a pretty amazing story here,
Yeah. Yeah. And again, the scale of this whole area that we're talking about is, I mean, we've talked about, what is the term, Sverdrup?
Sverdrup.
Sverdrup. I mean, how many of those are we talking about moving through this area? Like Kyle was trying to say, it's like it's an ocean in motion.
It's kind of what it is.
Yeah. It would take so much water that...
Darren, if you could go ahead and tell us, what is a Sverdrup?
Don't screw this up. Don't screw this. I have no idea.
Well, at least he's honest.
Yeah, that's right. Didn't screw it up.
But
No, I said that
just
because
don't test me again in 3 minutes.
You'll get this, so you'll never forget. A Sverdrup is a discharge of water, a current flow of water that is 100. I'm sorry, it's 1 million cubic meters per second.
That's right. Million cubic meters per second.
Might have to excuse me. I'm running on.
Yeah, all of
serious.
us.
We're all running on.
Well, yeah,
serious-
we've all been, a lot
Yeah.
of late nights and early mornings.
Yeah,
1 million cubic meters of water.
per
Yeah.
second.
per second. So that's the term that that's the. So when I say Sverdrup, I'm like, how many of those was moving through this area in order to
And so
erode
just
it?
for scale, like what's like Niagara Falls or something, just for
Not even close.
not
to
even
that.
worth
Yeah, not
mentioning.
even- not even close.
Yeah, it's like,
That's
So
insane.
1 million
really-
cubic feet per second. You guys see, you got your.
Cubic feet or cubic meters?
I'm sorry, cubic meters.
Okay, what do you want me to do?
Translate into feet, cubic feet per second.
Okay.
So a cubic meter is going to be 3.28 raised to the third power.
3.28. Okay.
Oh, so you got, yeah.
Yeah, I was checking
So
your
Kyle's doing water math. So Darren and I will talk about it. So you've lived in this area.
yeah.
Have you been to these places before? You've driven through? that area
No.
before? No, never gone
No.
to visit.
So
but you're kind of surrounded, not here specifically, but you're surrounded in some cases by these
That's
formations.
3.28 to the third
Some,
power.
you know, and I'd been to some other areas. We actually drove up
Yeah.
almost in between
Oh, no,
the
it's
areas
not.
that we just
no,
went
that's
to. We went to
3.2.
the
sorry.
Four Corners
Yeah, I'm
area
sorry.
years ago. Went to Moab in Utah, but we didn't make it all the way to Canyon de Chelly and Monument Valley.
Okay,
we didn't make
yeah.
it that far to the east.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. All right. So what do you guys got?
It's about 35. So 35.28 cubic feet per second. So that times a million is going to be 35 million
Oh yeah. Wow.
cubic feet per second.
35 million cubic feet per second. Yeah.
35 million.
When you're
That's
looking
one
at that
spur drip.
landscape, that's what it looks like happened.
Yeah, but times hundreds.
Well, the thing is, you know, we don't know what discharges were passing through that landscape. We do know some of the discharges up in the Pacific Northwest floods,
Right.
which were up in the scale of 6 to 800 million cubic feet per second. So divide 800 million by 35. Just
35 million.
divide 800 by 35.
Yeah. And that'll give you how many spur drips.
How many
was.
spur drops?
22.8.
So now
Five.
spur drop comes from a unit of measure that was contrived in order to talk about oceanic currents.
Yeah.
Okay.
Spur drops.
Yeah, well, there we go.
Right.
Right.
So
It was
it's
an
an
It is a
ocean
moving
river.
river. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's what it was, an ocean in motion.
Right. And so, is there a way to, is there a pathway to try to figure out how much water moved through there? I mean, is there evidence left in the rock, or is it just not, it would just have to be guesses and hypotheses?
At this point, guesses and
Right.
guesses.
Yeah. And you just have to guess based on looking at the formations.
Yeah.
I mean, they're so sheer. Maybe there's a way that maybe they cleave that way, but why are they? The cliff walls are so straight, and some of the pinnacles are tilted and look they're obviously not fragile, but they look
Well, I mean,
like
they
a
are
strong
fragile.
wind would knock them over. You
Yeah.
know, yeah. So it just seems like, and after you talking about it for a while, I can see how you can see based on looking at this area is large, and then there's these smaller and smaller pieces going out that there was a continuous erosion taking place, and the pieces way out here that are small were almost gone, and then the flood stopped before they were completely eradicated,
Right.
and that left like some of the little things that look like pyramids out in the middle of the flat area. Like that was
Right.
a huge rock that was eroded down to almost nothing before the flood slowed down and stopped.
Right. And once that flood stops, then at whatever stage the erosion is at, that's where it now remains
Now
for
it stays
thousands
there.
of years.
Right.
I want to make sure that nobody misinterprets, and I'm not saying that the landscape was carved by a single flood.
Event. Yeah. Yeah.
I
that's
don't
right.
think that. In
Yeah.
fact, I think it was multiple events.
Yeah.
Maybe a dozen to 40 events over the last 2.5 million years.
Okay.
But
But
whatever,
each one would have been profoundly catastrophic.
yeah, whatever it was, it had to go. At least the last one had to go from this side to that side, and I mean,
Yeah.
it had to fill that valley.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there would be a separate canyon.
a secondary canyon in the middle of it somewhere.
It's just,
yeah.
it's just mind blowing.
So when you talk about the scablands, you have the controversy of what was the water source, but there's a very obvious water source there. But for here, we're looking at that landscape of that massive amount of material that was moved. The only water source really would be rainfall,
Rainfall.
I can't imagine what else.
and that's pretty unbelievably catastrophic rainfall.
Well, I would say that is evidence that there periodically are climatic extremes that we've barely even begun to comprehend yet.
Yeah. Exactly.
And there are ways, though, to calculate peak discharges, which is usually symbolized by the letter Q. So you can say there are ways to calculate the Q value of a discharge. One of them is the size of the sediment entrained and transported. So, for example, I've shown 6 and 8 foot rounded boulders in the valley of the Jemez River on the flanks of Valles Calderas in New Mexico. And you can, by looking at those boulders, like an 8 foot boulder, you can come up with a range of of volumes and velocities that would be required to transport boulders of that size.
Yeah.
So that's one way. And then of course, if you can couple that with high water marks,
Yeah.
which is going to be difficult in this terrain though, because a watermark can be relatively ephemeral.
Yeah.
And when we're looking at these sandstone layers, I mean, they do erode
Yes.
continuously.
Right.
And so, if there's a watermark etched into a canyon wall, it may not be visible 10 or 20 or 30,000 years later.
Okay.
But it just would take a lot of field work
Right.
and looking for,
There might be forensic evidence, even if it's not visible anymore.
Yeah.
Right. Something you could find by.
like today we drove near the Chiricahua Mountains, and there you see, you've been there, Darren.
Yes,
Yes.
all through it.
All through it, yeah. And you can testify as to the amazing erosion of those volcanic tuffs, which are there. I mean, it's like how would you describe it? I mean,
That place is difficult to describe. Yeah, it's one of the most beautiful places I've
it's
been.
like a fairyland. It's like something that Hollywood contrived for some sci-fi fantasy movie or something.
Really?
Oh
Wow.
yeah.
Where is this?
It's about an hour and a half from here.
The Chiricahua Mountains.
Oh man.
You're gonna drive, and you're gonna drive right by the exit. And
No, I'm telling you.
Yeah. Just,
But it does.
Keep it
I mean,
yourself.
but it is an all-day hike to go through that place.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, if you go there, you're looking at that's those rocks are fairly soft. They're a rock type called tuff, TUFF, volcanic tuff, and it's a major eruption. God, I don't remember the dates on it on the top of my head. I knew this when I went there. I researched it all, but yeah, good. Kyle's gonna.
Kyle will figure
Let me
it out.
spell Chiricahua for you.
Cheer
Say it.
Kyle.
Darren will figure it
Hopefully, don't screw this up.
And this was the mountains were a stronghold for the Apache Indians when they were the Apache tribes when they were being hunted by the U.S. government. And there's a mountain in there that you have to be in the right perspective, but when you do, it's the profile of Cochise. It's pretty impressive to see.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
It has a nickname for that park too. That was something you were.
What were you? Wonderland Rocks? What
Yeah,
were you,
Wonderland of Rocks. Is that what it says?
Yeah.
Yeah.
what were you asking me to look up now?
The volcanic
Volcanic
eruption
age.
See that wonderland of rocks is this rock type called volcanic tuff.
Tough.
And it's a fairly soft rock type. So
That name.
It's easily eroded. Yeah.
It's not very.
I don't know the origin of that name. But at the base of the mountain, Wilcox Playa was an ancient lake. And you can go there. I've actually got photographs that we can probably show the
Yeah.
listeners at some point where you can see the ancient shorelines of this,
Okay.
which is now just a basin in the desert. But at times in the past, that rapidly filled and became a lake, maybe on multiple occasions. And I would associate the creation of those Wilcox Lake Wilcox, with the erosional events that created what you see there.
Yeah, and maybe white sands too. Like all these lakes that are out in the deserts now, they're just dry. Yeah. Wow.
Precambrian Mesozoic?
No one that old.
Okay.
No, because at that Precambrian, those rocks wouldn't even exist anymore.
Most active period of the in the volcanic history of the Chiricahua Mountains began near the end of the Mesozoic.
Okay.
That was the most active period, so I don't. Let's see.
What's the most recent eruption?
Yeah.
that deposited all that ash that was lithified into the volcanic tuff. That's what we're interested in here. But yeah, so that's an example, I think, of where you can see the erosion in the mountain areas, and then you see in the desert basins below where these giant ancient lakes existed.
Right.
So you know that for those huge lakes to have existed, there had to have been a lot of rainfall.
Right.
So wouldn't it make sense that those were the episodes of accelerated erosion? I think so.
So you're
Yeah.
saying the Chiricahuas experienced that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that much rainfall wouldn't be very local.
Because I think the Chiricahuas, the official story that I think you get when you're there, is it's largely I think it'll say on there is wind erosion.
That's what it says. During the past 27 million years, faulting and erosion have had the greatest impact on the landscape and topography of the Chiricahua Mountains. Uplift continued into the Quaternary, subjecting to the mountains to increased erosion. Alluvial fans formed along the flanks.
But see right there, alluvial. So right there, that's implying flowing water.
Right.
So, obviously that water had to have been eroding those rocks.
Yeah.
And I would
Massive
argue
stone
more
cold.
effectively than wind.
Yeah, I think so.
But I would also argue that the two forces worked in tandem. But fluvial erosion would have been the dominant.
The dominant
Yeah.
erosional force.
Okay. Well, I couldn't find it.
Well, there was several major explosive eruptions fairly recently, I think.
Okay.
We can find that out.
Yeah, we'll figure it out eventually.
But haven't been there.
Yeah, we didn't
so
go
why are
there,
we talking
yeah.
about that?
That wasn't even on the
Glad you bring it up.
I guess
Sounds cool.
Back to the trip. Anyway, yeah.
Well, it was because of the lakes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and we're talking about the rainfall. Because we're trying to imagine how could you get a moving ocean running across what is now an arid desert?
Yeah.
And yeah, I what you were just saying. I think that if there was that much rainfall, it couldn't have been a local event. This would have been at least hemispheric.
I would argue that
a global event.
at a minimum it
Yeah.
had to have been falling over the entire Colorado Plateau.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
well, then today was some archaeological sites.
That's right. Yep. We went to Montezuma's castle, which you said is not a castle.
That was good marketing by somebody there.
Well, I mean, a very old castle.
Yeah.
Because when you said that, you were like, it's like an adobe hut. And I was thinking, what? And then we get up there and I'm like, okay, no, I can see the castle.
But see, then I do a better job of
Yeah, I was
you're
not
selling
let
it, so then
down.
you're impressed.
That's right, I
If
wasn't
you
let
say
down. I
it's
looked at it, I was
Montezuma's
like,
castle,
I was like, that was
and then
actually-
you're looking at the place, and then you're still trying to look around, trying to find
Figure out
Montezuma's
where the castle is.
Well, I don't know about. I was impressed.
No, it's a cool place. And it does, I was pointing out to Randall on the side of it, because it's only on the one side, so if you walk by in just the front, you don't catch that. It has the T-shaped doors, which is a sign of the Chacoan culture.
Yeah. Yeah, that is cool. I thought it was very impressive. I mean,
The other thing impressive about it was just the massive round hole in the limestone wall
yeah.
that the thing was built inside of.
Right.
It was just like, I've seen a lot of limestone cliffs.
Yeah.
Right.
We live around them.
That whole area looked a lot like the landscape where we lived.
Yeah.
Same rock, same kind of trees and everything. I've never seen anything like that in a limestone cliff, and that was pretty cool. Just
Yeah.
it's like this giant ice cream scoop,
Yeah.
round
The
half hemisphere.
the closest thing would have been the skyline.
I mean, the skyline was a tilted, straight walled sort of. It wasn't even a scoop like this thing was.
I mean, the quarry part. When
Yeah.
you looked up there was this big overhang, and there was kind of a scoop, but it wasn't
Yeah.
nearly as pronounced. You're right. But that's what I'm saying, the closest thing.
That was really impressive
Yes,
to me.
it was.
Just the natural feature there.
We will mention that it's in the Verde Valley,
Right.
Okay.
and undoubtedly a community of people lived there, and they farmed in the valley, and it
Yeah.
probably was not too bad of a life, maybe.
Right.
And then we saw the well that was associated
And
with
that was
Montezuma
amazing
as
as
well. And let's mention that was just a 19th century name or something. Montezuma was never there.
No.
Right. No.
Let's be clear on
Yeah,
that.
he was never there. Yeah. No.
Or his castle.
No.
Yeah, there was not.
Yeah, I think that the original people, the settlers or whoever, when they found it, they realized that they were thinking it was Central American natives that had made it up that far and built it.
Yeah.
They hadn't seen anything like that, so
Yeah.
they assumed it belonged to Montezuma.
Yeah, this must be Montezuma's. And yeah, I think it reminded me of the Pueblo and stuff we saw in Mesa Verde.
Yep.
Yeah.
And not quite as extensive, but definitely the same style. Now, obviously, almost everything we saw there was a rebuild by archaeologists. And clearly this was also rebuilt. I think we were talking to some people and they're like, yeah, they rebuilt it, So it's not really...
I've seen 1800s pictures of that one, and
Yeah.
it's pretty close to that.
Pretty close, yeah.
So I mean, no doubt they restored pieces of it, but it's not rebuilt.
Okay.
Yeah, it was pretty close to that.
But like the next one we went to was almost totally rebuilt. Right?
Which one?
What
The
was
one
it
on the
called?
top of the hill.
Oh,
Tuesday Goot?
Tuesday Goot? Yeah, I don't know what it.
I mean, that mortar is definitely not. They didn't have that stuff.
It's hard to tell on the outside because even when I was in Chaco Canyon, I mean, one of the days that we were there, this was not on this trip,
Chaco
by the
Canyon
way.
was well, I wasn't Chaco
Much.
Canyon.
So,
A lot of it's rebuilt. Yeah.
But they do. I mean, they're out there. I mean, then they have natives working with the Park Service out there every day, and one of the guys was out there doing it.
Yeah.
And we just happened to be walking by, and he let my son and my daughter put blocks in and mortar it in. So that was awesome.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but so I know of course they're doing repair work, but I don't know what. So for Tuesday Good, it's hard to tell on the outside because they're going to constantly be patching it. So what the core of it looks like, I'm not sure.
I see. Yeah, I was assuming that too because of what we learned in that Chimney Rock and those places in Colorado. They told us about how when the archaeologists first found these things, they were just mounds of
rubble.
stone.
Yeah.
And they carefully excavated all the stone and set the pieces aside until they got down to the footing. And that's what gave them the layout. And they had organized all the stone that they picked up, so they put it back and stacked it.
And tried to
get as good as
close as they could, but
I mean, what a job that would be, rebuilding that structure from a pile of rubble.
But apparently there's some astronomy going on at Tuesday Goot.
Yeah.
It looks like, Randall
pointed
noticed
it out.
it because we were there right about before the setting sun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, somebody had somewhere along the line said that there was some astronomical evidence there for archaeoastronomy, and yeah, we could see that it was a near perfect north-south alignment of the axis of this structure that's up on this ridge.
Right.
It's on an elevated ridge, so it has a spectacular view of the Verde Valley.
360 degrees, yeah.
Yeah. And then due east, what looked to be due east, there was a saddle in the mountains on
That's
the
right.
horizon.
That's
And
right.
so we speculate that maybe on the equinoxes, that's where the sun would be
Sun would
setting.
rise. Or
Did I say east? I meant west.
West,
West.
yeah.
I meant west, yeah.
Yeah.
So we've got some Snake Force people volunteering to go back.
Yep.
On the equinox and see if Randall is right.
See where the sun sets on that day. Yeah. Yep. So all in all, it was a fantastic trip. Of course, every night we hung out and made a lot of noise and
Cooked
probably
a lot of food and
pissed everybody off that was around us. It was fantastic.
great group of people too.
Yeah, it was a really good group of people. And there's more stories to tell, but I think.
Well, one more thing. Just before we go, how did you get into all this stuff? How did you learn about Randall and start looking into all this ancient stuff?
So I've been a big history buff for a long time. So I was reading a lot of stuff, and then followed Graham Hancock and listening to the Joe Rogan podcast, and that's when I saw Randall on there. So yeah, I was then we actually went to Graham was out here in Sedona last year, and Robert, who put on this one, put on that event. And so we went up there, we did a day trip with Graham, and then we did the book signing and stuff that evening. And I just talked to him at the end of it. I was like, you should bring out here on, if you want to do another one of these. I was like, you should bring Randall out here. I didn't even think about doing a multi-day trip. So he really expanded upon that. I was like, that would be awesome.
You told Robert that?
Yeah.
Cool.
Wait, so you're the reason this whole thing happened?
This is your fault?
My fault. Well, he said when he got out here, that he was going to tell Julie it was all my fault.
Well, that's great, man. It was a great trip.
It was a great trip.
Yeah. Glad to have met everybody. But we are all worn out, so I think we're gonna sign off and go to bed.
Yep.
So
Well, thanks for having me on the show, guys.
thanks
Thanks
for
for
being here,
sitting there,
Randall.
buddy.
Yeah.
Darren, it was great meeting you and hanging out with you. And now here we are at Darren's house. He's playing host to us.
Yep, that's right. We're podcasting in one of his bedrooms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is what happens.
We love
This
you.
is what happens.
And we had an amazing dinner.
Yes, that's right.
We did.
Yep.
Yep, Casey.
Oh wait,
Darren's
well,
wife.
wait. There was one more site. We went to the. Did we mention that we went to Murray Springs? We didn't. We didn't mention that. So we'll say that one. Yeah. The reason we're here at Darren's place is because he lives really close to really close to Murray Springs, which is a site where the black mat is actually exposed, and it was a Clovis hunt site or something. Supposedly there was a mammoth skeleton found there.
Yeah.
So we barely made it here just before the sun set. I mean, the sun was already down and it was getting dark. And we parked, ran down the path, and were able to...
Darren's waiting at the gate,
Yeah.
and the gate says, gate will be closed and
at
locked
dusk.
at dusk.
Yeah.
He's
We were
like, I left a note in the lock, let's go. I'm like, oh, God.
Like, don't lock us in here.
Yeah. So we hauled ass down there and then ran down the trail, and we were able to see the black mat just before it, before the...
And Casey and Darren cooked us dinner,
That's right.
made us steaks, and man,
Yeah.
I really appreciate you guys.
Excellent.
No, glad to have you.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, folks.
Thanks, guys. Yep.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.